Hope you're well. Before we start the part 6 of the NRG story, big shout out to You Don't Say It, Hubber at 18 over here, which is about 6 million views with nearly 25% of that like, so that's incredible. Hopefully that will transfer onto this channel, and I'm sure it will do, good old YouTube. And also on YouTube, Hassan Hiss down here, that's doing incredibly well, and big shout out to that and the guys for assisting in that production. On to the story. So we left it at the big melee that was the fight between the NRG and the garage, and we decided to leave with obviously the loss of my friend's friend Fuzz. And we had a car that we could use. I actually had a flight, but decided I wished to travel with my friends through Europe. I just thought it was all going to be part of the experience, even after things that had just gone on. Hence part of the, well, this was a story to be told. And a character that I'd missed through this story so far was a guy what we called Bungle. Now, Bungle was a biggish guy, somebody that worked the door at the NRG, all larger than harder, I think would be a fair thing to say. But the thing about Bungle is that he was supposed to be a Commonwealth swimmer, European swimmer, one of the two, but a good swimmer all in all. But we called him Bungle because he was quite big and he was quite hairy, and Bungle was a character out of a children's program called Rainbow. Look it up somewhere there. And Bungle had a car, a BMW, a very sporty BMW, if I remember rightly. And the idea was that we were going to get permissions to drive through Europe by catching a boat from Rhodes over to Athens, and then traversing through the former Republic of Yugoslavia, if it was a republic, I can't quite remember. And then through varying countries to get back and then cross the English Channel. What we hadn't known before we set out is that Bungle being Bungle and Bungle having certain group mates had things that he brought in with him, things that were back in the day, things of great value. A camcorder, a computer. Now, nothing so flashed nowadays, but at that point, quite expensive bits of equipment. And as I've touched upon before, tax authorities in Greece, as around the world, are very onto importation of anything. But Bungle hadn't mentioned this, but we later found out what he had and hadn't done. So we left. There was a big farewell from us, from friends and ladies alike, and we left Fanny Licky to Rhodes town, where we caught a boat, went over to Athens. Then in Athens, we managed to find where we had to get the necessary paperwork to travel through Europe, which we duly did. Bungle let me, as I was the other designated driver, take over, and we drove up to then what was the Yugoslavian border. This was before the war that split Yugoslavia into the different countries that it is now, or was before, but deunited, shall we say. What Bungle hadn't told us is that he brought these bits of electrical equipment in, and he'd been advised by his friends that to say he'd lost his passport, which he duly did. But what Bungle hadn't told us is he was taking us back to the same passport control as what he came into the country. When we got to passport control, we handed over our passports, but Bungle had an emergency passport. An emergency passport was just a sheet of paper with his photo that he'd done some consulate service within Rhodes town. He hadn't told us this. The Greek authorities and border control wasn't happy with his explanation. So they didn't return our passports and then decided to search the car. And they turned the car inside out, only to find Bungle's passport, his original one, the one that he'd lost. And in the back of this passport, he'd had the stamps of a camcorder and also a computer. So the situation got a little bit worse for ourselves. The Greeks got quite animated, as they can, and saying all kinds of things. As I said, my Greek at the time wasn't great, but Malaka was a word that came out countless times to Bungle, and to the rest of us, but more to Bungle. And with that, they wanted to fine him. So him being fined and him being the driver and it's his car as well, we were all in the shtuck. So they wouldn't hand the car back. They kept our passports. And so then we had to make our way down to a hotel not far away and stay the night while they decided what they was going to do. In the interim, David, my friend, had problems with the authorities in Corfu, chasing him in the UK for the caravan and the vehicle that he'd had while he had a ski business. And so in his passport, there was varying stamps with the Cyrillic alphabet of Greek writing. But it'd been stamped over that many times, you couldn't clearly make out what it was. But fortunately for us, at the border, they weren't interested in Dave, but more Keith, because then they said that Keith had a car, which he hadn't. I think Keith had exported some records and relied on Dave, but it was all a mess. And so what happened then was that Dave had then told me about the situation he had going on back in the UK, that the Greek authorities were looking for him or wanted to ask questions about the things that he had in Corfu, whenever that was, when he had a water ski business. So he said to me, well, with everything going on and with the funeral of Fuzz, could we go back together, him and I, and try and get our passports back and go across the border and let Keith and Bungle come over by themselves after they sorted out what was or what wasn't in the back of their passports. I agreed. Thought, yeah, it's no problem. So in the morning, after stopping a not very nice night's sleep at the border, we went across and we did manage to get our passports back, explaining that we didn't know what was going on, more David than I. And I remember having this big red ice hockey bag on my shoulder. Dave had some kind of awful suitcase, I think it was, kind of brown colour. And we walked across the border, passing all these larder cars trying to get into Greece from Yugoslavia and getting across to the border, which we did. And in my big 94-page passport, got one of the only stamps that was in it at the time from Yugoslavia. You can't get that one there anymore. So we got to the side of the other border. Dave was relieved, so he hadn't had to explain any more about the stamps in the back of his passport and what was really going on from Corfu to the UK, but nothing to do with what was going on at this border. And on the other side, there was a cafe. We walked to the cafe, two English guys in the middle of nowhere, really. And at the cafe, we got us a couple of Cokes. Now, what we hadn't realised with the rate of inflation was that the money had, even though it looked similar, had lots of different zeros or didn't have zeros. So we thought then we could actually live in Yugoslavia for the rest of our lives just after buying a can of Coke, because it seemed so cheap. But it was the rate of inflation which was spiraling out of control, and what we believe now is that they reprinted money and put zeros on or took zeros off to suit what was ever going on with the massive inflation. To qualify this, I needed to go to the toilet, and there wasn't one in the cafe worth going to. It was quite disgusting, if I remember. And I went back up to the border. Whilst at the border, I was looking to find a toilet that, and I don't know those who've ever been in certain countries where there aren't your traditional sit-down toilets, but a squat toilet. And I was looking underneath the doors of the gents to see where I could actually sit. I wasn't a peeping Tom. I was just looking to see where I could sort myself out. And whilst looking under, I raised my head and banged it on a urinal. So holding my head, not going to the toilet, I came out of the toilet door and to see a girl with a bum bag around her waist. I looked up And I thought, well, this was unusual. We were two lads in the middle of nowhere. And I just said to her, are you English? She goes, yeah. I said, well, what are you doing here? She goes, oh, we're travelling around Europe. I said, but you're at the Greek Yugoslavian border. If you were travelling, you wouldn't be stopping here. She goes, oh, no, we're waiting for these Belgian lorry drivers to take me and my friend all the way to Belgium. I just said, oh, have you not got a train ticket? She goes, oh, no, we have a train ticket, but we thought we'd go to Belgium and then go somewhere else. I said, oh, is there a train station here? She goes, I don't know. So I said, I think my friend and I might be catching a train if our friends don't come over the border. She goes, oh. I said, why didn't you come with us? So with that, she got a friend out the lorry that was going with the Belgian lorry drivers, and all three of us walked down to see Dave standing outside, shaking his head, looking at me with a smile. And that's going to be the next part of the story. So with that, we'll end it here, not get you too bored. And we'll go to part 7 next time. Take care.